Here's where we're at. The mood of a standard form categorical syllogism is determined by the letters that correspond to the premise and conclusion statements that comprise that standard form categorical syllogism. The figure of a standard form categorical syllogism is going to be determined by the location of the middle term. Okay, and there's a total of 4 possible combinations of locations for the middle terms, all represented in this handy chart right here. Now, when we take the mood and we combine it up with the figure, we get the form of the argument. So let's say we have an argument like this one. Some women are CR students. All women are human beings. Therefore, some human beings are CR students. To identify the form of this argument, we first determine its mood. We have an I statement premise, an A statement premise, and an I statement conclusion, and that tells us this argument has the mood of IAI. What's its figure? Well, let's locate the position of the middle term, women. We can see that women appears in the subject position of both the first and second premise. That corresponds to figure 3. So this argument has the form IAI in figure 3. How's this going to change your life? In chapter 3.4 of your course text and on your chapter 3.4 summary handout, there's some really useful charts there. One of them is this one. This chart has a total of 15 valid forms of standard form categorical syllogisms, okay? And all of these syllogisms are valid from all of these argument forms are valid from both the Aristotelian and the Boolean standpoint. They are unconditionally valid. You have another chart. This chart has a total of 9 forms of valid standard form categorical syllogisms, but all of these are valid from the Aristotelian standpoint only, not the Boolean, okay? So you can use these charts to evaluate arguments really quickly and efficiently. How, you ask? Well, just take a look at the argument we were looking at previously. We determined that the form of this argument is IAI figure 3. To determine if this argument is valid or invalid, we simply go to the unconditionally valid forms first, because any argument valid from on this chart is going to be valid from the Aristotelian standpoint only. We locate the column that represents figure 3, and we just simply scroll down that column to see if we find the mood of the argument we're considering. And look at that. It's right there. And that proves this argument is unconditionally valid. It is valid from the Boolean and the Aristotelian standpoint. All right, let's try one more. All bicyclists are fun people. No creepy people are fun people. Therefore, no creepy people are bicyclists, okay? So we looked first at the mood. What's the mood of this argument? We have an A statement premise, an E statement premise, and an E statement conclusion. That tells us this is an AEE mood, okay? Where are the middle terms? Fun people is our middle term, and we can see it's in the predicate position of both the first premise and the second premise. That tells us this is figure 2, so the form of this argument is AEE figure 2. To determine if it's valid, we simply wander up here to our unconditionally valid forms chart, and we look at figure 2. And we're looking for AEE, and look at that, it's right there, and that proves this argument is unconditionally valid. Okay, one more. I want you to figure this one out. Is this argument unconditionally valid, conditionally valid, or invalid? Okay? And I'm just going to give you a heads up. There's kind of a trick here. See, I really want you to pause your video and try to determine what the form of this argument is. And I'm just telling you right up front, I'm trying to trick you with this one. So see if you can slip out of my wily ways and actually figure out what the right form of argument is here. When you're ready to check your work, go ahead and restart your video. All right, did you spot my attempt at tricking you? Let's see what we've got going on here. So we have an E statement, an A statement, and an O statement. So that would appear to be offering us an EAO mood, and we can see that the middle terms are connected with a downward sloping line from left to right. That indicates figure 1. So that says EAO figure 1. And sure enough, we come over here, and it is not on this chart in figure 1, so it's not valid from the Boolean standpoint. We know that. But it appears to be valid from the Aristotelian standpoint, because look at that. It's right there in our figure 1 column. But I tricked you, and I bet I didn't trick you. I bet you found my slight attempt at tricking you. Remember, for us to have a valid standard form categorical syllogism, it has to meet the criteria for being standard form. It has to have 3 terms that appear 2 times each, exactly the same way. Each time it's got to be comprised of 3 standard form categorical statements, and this syllogism meets all of those criteria. But remember that the major term, the predicate of the conclusion, needs to appear somewhere here in the first premise. And the minor term, the subject of the conclusion, needs to appear somewhere here in the second premise, and they don't. So if you would have marked on a quiz, this argument has the form EAO1, you would have gotten it wrong. And then you'd been like, oh my gosh, what am I missing? But of course, you know what you're missing now. You probably knew it before. You're going to have to rearrange those premises. You're just going to have to flip them around so that our predicate term, clowns, appears somewhere here in the first premise. And now we see that our middle terms are joined by an upward sloping line from left to right. And that tells us this is figure 4, not figure 1. So then we come over here to our chart and we look at this. Do we see AEO in figure 4, AEE, IAI, EIO? Nope. That tells us this argument is not valid from the Boolean standpoint. But now we get to move over here to the conditionally valid chart. Do we see AEO in figure 4? Yep, it's right there, okay? So that tells us that this argument is invalid from the Boolean standpoint, but conditionally valid. Conditionally valid from the Aristotelian standpoint. Now, here's a really important feature of these charts. Remember that for a condition, for an argument to be valid from a conditional, for an argument to be valid from the Aristotelian standpoint, we have to satisfy the condition of existence. And this column here in our chart tells us which of the terms in our categorical syllogism has to refer to an actually existing thing. Is it the subject term of the conclusion, the middle term, or the predicate term of the conclusion? And we can see here for our argument form, the condition that's required for validity is that the subject term of the conclusion has to refer to an actually existing thing. That's creepy people. Do creepy people exist? Yeah, unfortunately. So this argument has met the condition for validity from the Aristotelian standpoint. Okay? Finally, one note I want you to make to yourself. You'll notice that all 15 of the forms of argument on the unconditionally inventory, they all have either all universal premises and a universal conclusion, all or no statements, or they have a particular conclusion, like a sum statement, but they'll also have then a particular premise, okay? So particular statements come in pairs. You might think about it that way. The other thing you'll notice is on this inventory, every single argument has a similar feature. Every single one has 2 universal premises and a particular conclusion. All right? And so we'll talk more about this as we dig deeper back into the Boolean versus Aristotelian standpoints. But just kind of make a mental note of that for now.